Hi, Minister. Pleasure to welcome you to our set here on the House of Commons. I appreciate
Happy
making
New
the
Year.
time.
I know
it feels late, but
it's still good.
Same.
It's still the time to say hello and wish you all the best for this. It's been a busy year for you as well.
Yes, it has, and we'll get right into it because it's going to be a busy year coming up as well. Starting off with this announcement from your government today on the rebate. Now, I was covering the Liberals back in 2022 when a version of this with the GST rebate was announced. Since then, grocery prices have gone up at a minimum by 10% from 2022 until now. If it didn't work then to address the root cause of what Canadians are dealing with at the grocery store, why will it now?
Well, it's very, very different. And trust me, we did the number. So first of all, you have a bump and a bridge. So the bump is like we look at what's the food price, the excess food price inflation since 2020, during the COVID period. That is about $782. That's what you would find as the excess food price that families have. So what we did, we say, people understand that we have a plan, Vision 2030. A lot of the things we're doing are going to pay dividend, but it's going to take a few years. So we say what we're going to do is that we're going to help people now. Because that's what young Canadians, seniors, families across the country, they say, give us a hand now. So that's the bump. You see the 50% increase this year. And then we say we're going to help with 25% increase on a going forward basis. So this is very meaningful for families. I mean, you're talking about hundreds of dollars in addition in the pocket of Canadians. And if you take a family with 2 kids, you're talking of $1,890 that they will receive this year. So and we met with the Canadian Food Bank representative, and if you look at their report in detail, they'll tell you that that kind of money makes a huge difference for millions of families in Canadian. Actually, this is going to go to 12 million Canadians. So it's the bump and it's the bridge. So by the time that we come to 2030, the increase in the economy, the economic growth that we're driving is going to help Canadians, but in the meantime, they needed a bridge.
How can you be sure that that will be the case? So I did interview actually the CEO of the food banks before she presented to you. I know that there's a record number of Canadians last month who visited, and 30% of them are kids. She said a high portion of them are working. And in fact, I've done interviews with her over the course of a number of years where she said the same thing. I remember interviewing you, I believe it was fall of 2023.
You have a good memory.
I do, when you were saying explicitly to the grocery stores, you got to stabilize the prices or else. Again, it's not just low-income Canadians dealing with increases of grocery prices that far outpace the median rate of inflation. It's all Canadians. Your government so far has failed to address that increase in prices. Why is this going to be any different?
Well, we focus on the bump and the bridge, but what we're doing also is structural measures. So I did talk, for example, to the unions of farmers in Quebec, which you call the UPA, and asking them what are the structural issues. So, for example, you'd find because we're a Nordic country, we import about 30% of our fresh produce in a year. When you come to the winter, it's about 80 to 90%. So that's why we say we need structural measures as well to help, because we want to have more food security in the country. So we said, okay, we are going to have a national food strategy. We're going to allow the immediate expenses for greenhouses because we need to produce more in Canada. We're going to put $500 million in our strategic response fund, when we created in light of the tariff, to say, okay, we're going to look at how can we package more food in Canada? How can we transform more food in Canada? How can we have abattoirs in Canada? Because there's a number of structural things in the system that you need to address. So it's not the short-term measure is because people say, we need a break now. So we answer to that. But at the same time, if you look at the announcement, the vast majority of the measure are structural measures, which we talk with the Farming Association across the country to say, what are the things that would make a difference so that we import less, we produce more, and by being a bit more resilient in Canada, you will be facing in a much better way the pressure you mentioned about food prices.
And I take that point, but a few years ago, you were saying that the structural issue was a lack of competition in the grocery sector leading to higher prices. You said you were talking to a foreign grocer that might come right away. None of that ever materialized. The Conservatives are saying today there's actually other built-in costs beyond the ones around resilience that you mentioned. Taxes, industrial taxes, hidden food packaging costs. Will you take a look at any of those?
Well, listen, we're looking at all the levers, and you're right. I did call a number of them. There were structural issues why they were not coming in Canada. I'll tell you, for example, you had restrictive covenant in leases, which prevented, for example, a new entrant to come close to an established established grocery store. We got rid of that. We made that illegal in Canada. So we took a number of measures.
So where are they?
Well, I mean, it takes time for them to, consider the Canadian markets, but, we're going to do what we can control. What I can control is to make sure that structurally we produce more food in Canada. Structurally, I would say package more food in Canada. Structurally, that we have a better supply chain. We've been talking with them and say, what are the issues that makes Canada food more expensive, apart from being a Nordic country, which, some people would understand. And you know why it matters is because otherwise we are dependent on imports from abroad, which are then dependent on the Canadian dollar value. They're dependent on weather events. They're depending on global market. If you look at sugar, if you look at, for example, the price of coffee, if you look at the price of beef, a lot of the calves go to the south of the border, then they come back in Canada. So how can we, so one measure, like I said, was immediate help for families, seniors, and young Canadians. The other one is structural. So that I would say is very different than what you look back at the time. Because these structural measures will make us more resilient.
So what about
Plus, we need to bring more competition.
What about those taxes, like the industrial carbon tax, like the food packaging costs due to plastics regulations? Is all of that up for review? And I ask because in the past, Liberals have reflexively said no, that link that Conservatives are making is false. And yet, just this morning, I heard the Prime Minister tout the benefits of increasing affordability thanks to getting rid of the carbon tax. Another thing Liberals frequently said on this program would not affect affordability at all.
Well, we took a number of measures. You're quite right. I mean, if you look at the number of measures we've done to support Canadians, you talk about the dental care program, talk about pharma care, you're talking about early learning and child care. I mean, there's a number of things to help Canadians. But the thing that I heard most, and probably you as well, when you talk to Canadians, I think food and shelter is the thing that comes to mind most, because food is something that you face, like, the price of food is every day or every week, the rent is every month. So we're trying to really look at, if you look at the disposable income of a family, the first thing is about their shelter, then it's about food, sometimes cars would come first, then you talk about cell phone bills, you talk about student loans. So we're looking at the different structural costs that a family would have typically, and how we can address that. So
that's why I'm asking about taxes. To be clear, that's my question. Are you going to consider a reduction in other costs that contribute to food?
Today is a milestone. I can tell you, you look at this measure, this is I would say, I don't want to say historic because I choose the word, but it's a very significant measures in terms of the tax break we're giving to Canadians. I mean, the first one was a tax cut, but this tax break is going to 12 million Canadians.
Yeah, that's not all Canadians who are buying food, though, to be clear, who are also faced with these increased costs.
Well, that's why, but this is money in their pockets, so they can use it for food, they can use it for other things. But the reality is that this is a very big structural change in order to help people at a time of need, whilst the logic we have with the Prime Minister when we talk is that we understand, we're the second fastest growing economy, we're attracting investment. This is all nice. But if you talk to my mother, she would say, what about now? And this is really the thing we say, okay, we heard you. We heard Canadians, we heard students, we heard seniors. They say, you need to do something now. People get it. Our Vision 2030, they say, by 2030, you'll have all these investments, more work, more growth, more GDP per capita. This is all nice, but people are saying, what about now? And that's why we're trying to do both. There's a bridge and there's a boost at the same time.
I understand those points. My question was about more structural possibilities with additional reduction of cost, but I got to move on because I only have a minute left, and I want to ask you about one other thing. Affordability, and you mentioned cars, right?
Yeah.
Chinese electric vehicles, I've heard the way in which your government is now talking about this change to allow some in, that it will allow for a more affordable market for Canadians. When I interviewed you in March of last year, so President Trump was already there. President Trump was already there. The trade war had already been launched. He had threatened all those tariffs. You said, no way are we getting rid of those tariffs on EVs. In this case, you have China, who does not respect the rules. They're dumping products here and cheap products, and therefore that would be hurting our Canadian economy and industry. Why has your government's position changed so dramatically when the conditions surrounding it have not?
It's very simple. Well, I would say the world has changed. In a few months, the world has changed dramatically. Our neighbor to the south has changed. I mean, I would say the speed, scope, and scale of change in the world is quite unprecedented. We just came from Asia. When the Prime Minister was in Asia, I was in the Middle East with him in Europe. And some would go back to 1945. Some would go back to the fall of the Berlin Wall. It's geopolitics, geoeconomics, supply chain, it's technology, AI, and quantum. So all of these change requires you to be humble and to say, well, the world is changing at a speed, and our viewers understand that. There's so many things changing so rapidly that we had to pivot. We have to take the world as it is and being pragmatic in order to support Canadian industry.
But the world was that way in March of 2025. I mean,
it was
the president
not at the
had
same
already
speed.
threatened all the tariffs. Some of them had even come into effect. He had been the president for 3 months, and you had a very principled stance about this, and those principles appear to have completely changed.
I would say, with respect, the world was not there yet. I mean, the world has evolved since the time you and I talked about that last time. I would say a few months has really changed. I mean, you just have to look what happened in Switzerland. We were all there. I think people realize now that more resiliency, diversifying market, building new partnership is essential for Canada's prosperity and our sovereignty. You know, this is not an ordinary time. This is a time where all Canadians need to shoulder up what we're facing. And like I said, Vacha would have seen, I've rarely seen in this country such a sense of patriotism, of unity, of willing to work with us and the Prime Minister to say, this is a new world. We are Canadian. We're proud of our heritage. We're proud of our values. I'm very confident about the future, but that's why we need to stick together in these tough moments.
I'll leave it on that note. Minister, a pleasure as always. Thank you for making the time.
Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure.